Hey there guys, so in this video I'm just going to go over on how to grow bigger arms, more specifically biceps and forearms in this video. Now, just as a big mention beforehand, triceps, they make up, a vast majority of your arm, about 2/3 generally, depending upon the individual. So, yeah, I'm going to have to do a video on that. I'd prefer to do that as a standalone video, but just covering more of the biceps and forearms in this particular one. So for me, when it comes to training, biceps, I like to hit, 2 sets of either the easy bar or the barbell curl. Now, I refer to them as my top sets. That's where I go heavier than, say, the other exercises. And break times between those 2 sets is roughly about 5 minutes or so. You don't need an excessive amount of volume in order to really grow your arms. It comes down to the quality, like most things. But biceps and forearms, I find the frequency, training them, 2 to 3 times a week if I want them to grow, works really well. If you're going for 3 times a week, then the total volume each session is going to be on the lower end of the scale versus, twice a week you can get some quality volume in there as well, but nothing like, 16 or 20 sets. You don't need anywhere near that sheer amount of volume. So as I was saying, 2 top sets for me work well, and then I like to move on to something like a dumbbell or kettlebell curl. The weight's lighter. I typically do 10 reps, swap over arms, short break, 10 reps, and I go back and forth. Now, I'll hit 4 to 5 sets in this method. You could call it one giant set if you want. But the goal here is to work towards failure on set number 4 or 5, like you're really starting to push. If you need to have, 30 seconds break between arms, then, that's all good. It's a way of training strength endurance and just, strengthening the arms, getting used to a bit of volume without needing, a ridiculous amount of total sets and reps to achieve it. And this is more in line with, strongman and some other competitions, or medleys, where you've got to work hard and then move on to another exercise and work hard again. So it's also, conditioning of the biceps tendon. There's a fair bit of forearm involvement in this as well, just because, the kettlebell has a thicker handle. You just have to grip onto it and, really pay attention to what you're doing. And another reason why I like this style when it comes to concentration curls and things like that is you can adjust where you want to put your elbow each, set, and you don't have to wait, a prolonged period of time. And if you want, you can even adjust, where your elbow's sitting mid-set, and it just gives a different feel. You can really concentrate on the muscle that you're trying to work because the total load isn't as heavy. Now, with the 2 top sets, that's where you want to use your progressive overload, really structure the training so you're trying to increase the total weight over time, because that's another measure of strength and you're going to get bigger and stronger. But when it comes to, this exercise, which I'm going to call a secondary exercise, it's really about feeling the muscle work. If you want to slow the reps down, you can. If you want to speed them up, that's up to you. But it's playing around with weight and you're just feeling the tension as you go along, and you get a really good pump, but also, you're still working quite hard, especially towards that 4th and 5th set or swap over is when you really start to feel the fatigue build. Now, after this, I'll move on to something like forearms, and again, it's about the quality of the movement. With forearms, for me, static grip strength is something that I get a fair bit when I do like my shrugs or my trap bar deadlifts, versus when I'm directly, trying to train the forearms, I want to work it through a fuller range of motion, and I have included a video for that as well. So in that regard, I'm working on, opening and closing my hand, really focusing on how the movement feels, as opposed to, bicep curls where I'm just really concentrating only on the pulling motion. I'm not really needing to worry about too much. A lot of people have famously said, everything's in the eccentric. For me, I've never really been a lifter where I can feel everything working as well eccentrically. versus on the concentric, the up phase, I can really feel the muscle work. And I prefer to do it in that manner. It works better for me as an individual. But like anything, everyone's different. When it also then comes to, training the forearms, break times, I try and keep, similar to what I'm doing here with the kettlebell, just alternating hands, trying to chase a little bit more of a pump. In terms of top sets, I don't really go too hard with top sets on the forearms, simply because, from a static grip strength point of view, they're going to get heavily taxed when I do my trap bar deadlifts, my shrugs, or even my regular deadlifts or pull-ups for that matter. So I just want something that's a little bit different, because I've already got the top end, grip strength from a different exercise, versus, when I muck around with the forearm, the grip machine, I'm really concentrating on that range of motion, which often gets neglected. Like, go to a gym, and you're lifting, the majority of the time you're holding onto a barbell or dumbbell, you've got that static grip strength down point, versus something like this, the forearm machine. You can see that, I have to actively, work the forearms through a different range of motion, and that's something that I find I really lack. And going for a heavier top set, I find that, the weight that I can use dramatically drops off, versus, the forearms have a lot of, slow twitch fibers in them. They're better suited at endurance work as a whole, so I may as well train them in that regard, get as much as I can out of the training. And again, if you want to muck around with more of your static grip strength, you can muck around with, something like the power roller, which my son's playing with. That's a different form. Again, you're really focusing on your crushing grip strength in a static position with something that's, substantially bigger than, holding onto a dumbbell or a barbell. So again, it's a different, I'm going to say, range of motion, even though the motion itself doesn't change too much. Like, you'll see me, doing it here. And, I'm doing this now just simply because it does hit a different, static portion of my forearm that I don't normally use. So, it just works well for these. Again, 4 sets I find works quite well. So, I do 2 top sets on the barbell movement, then I go into that set of curls, concentration curls, where I'll get 4 to 5 sets, and then I'll muck around with something like, the static holds at the end. After that, I'll do 2 to 3 sets of the extensions, and that really cooks, my wrists and the top of my forearms, the extenders, really quite thoroughly. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below. Hit like and subscribe, and have a great day wherever you are.